All right. Well, hello there, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in your part of the world. Welcome, welcome. My name is Maria Wich-Vila, and I am the founder of ApplicantLab.com. I'm a 2005 graduate of Harvard Business School, and I have been giving admissions advice since 2003. So I'm coming up, next year is going to be my 20th anniversary, which is crazy. But the good news is that by joining me here today, you get to learn from my years of experience. And if you like what you see here today, you can check out a lot more of my advice at ApplicantLab.com. It's the affordable alternative to traditional admissions consulting. So what we've got here today is we have 3 candidates who are looking to apply to business school. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through their profiles and sort of analyze where have they been to date? What have they been doing with their careers? What are things maybe they should focus on? What should they talk about for their career vision for school, et cetera, et cetera. And in case you're sitting here and you're like, yeah, but I'm not one of these 3 people, why should I watch this session? Well, because a lot of the advice that I like to give is I like to give generalizable advice as I go through, right? So I'm not just, I try to give specific advice to the candidate who joins, but I'm also keeping in mind that it's not just the 3 of them watching. And as I go through, I like to try to think of advice that might be more broadly applicable. And then at the end of this, I will stick around for questions to the extent that is reasonable. Sometimes I stay for a really long time, and then poor Abhijit over at GMAT Club doesn't get to sleep over in India. So I will try to be reasonable, but I do like to answer as many questions as I can. So with that out of the way, we have our 3 candidates right now, ST, EG, and Jackson. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with ST. And so let's pull up a slide with her background. ST, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Maria. So I'm from Hyderabad. I've done my bachelor's in business administration from an Indian university with a specialization in accounting and finance and international business. I initially worked with the Big Four as a GRCS analyst, and then went on to do a social entrepreneurship fellowship for 2 years in Rajasthan. And post that, I started to work with an impact incubator, first as an analyst in the education employability team, and then later as a part of the partnerships team. My most recent stint is with the early stage consumer VC. Yeah, that's about it.
All right, excellent. And so you are looking to apply to business school, I'm guessing this upcoming year. So to start in so it's 2022 right now, so you would start in 2023.
Yeah.
Is what I'm guessing. Perfect. Okay, so you graduated currently about 6 years ago. So you would be entering business school with 7 years. So you're sort of right at that sweet spot in terms of number of years of experience. Not too many, not too few. So right off the bat, that's good. So give me a sense of, it's interesting that you started as sort of a big, one of the big 4 type of large firms. And then from there, you've sort of bounced, you sort of jumped to the social impact, a very social impact job, like very hands-on social impact job. And then you sort of were doing some early stage social enterprise incubation, and now you're in this more early stage VC fund. Just out of curiosity, have you had like a large increase in your personal responsibilities in terms of your impact on the firm or your impact on portfolio companies? Tell me a little bit about that.
So sorry, can you just repeat the question once more?
Sorry. So can you tell me, you've sort of, if you were to describe sort of the trajectory of your increases in responsibilities in your career, especially more recently, like what impact have you been having on your fund? I think have you only been there for about a few months?
Yeah, a year.
A year. Okay. Oh, so 220. It had an end date of January 2022. So I was like, wait, was that the start date? Was that the end date? Okay. So you've been there for a year. So what has sort of been what is the impact that you're having now on the firm, and in terms of the decisions that they make, or in terms of helping portfolio companies? What does that look like right now?
So I was there until Jan 2022. So the most of the work that I was doing was as an analyst, which was to support the investment team in working with the portfolio companies that it's doing any sort of research for any new products, any sort of hiring support, etc. But it was also doing some of the fundraising work for a new fund, and making sort of like limited partner the progress reports about our portfolio companies. So not at a really sort of like a managerial level, more at like a sort of analyst level. Yeah.
I see. I see. And in your previous enterprise incubators, did you have more experience, or was it also a similar analyst type of responsibility?
So in my previous job, I initially started out as an analyst in the education employability team, but after about a year of doing that, I started working with the partnerships team as an associate. So that was more about enabling partnerships with donors and corporates, trying to make these programs work.
I see. I see. So your career goal is you want to go into impact investing, but in more of an investor role, I'm
Yeah,
guessing, and less of
yeah,
a okay. So I think one of the challenges is that right now you are not still working at that.
not anymore. Yeah.
Okay. So what is are you looking for a job, or I know it's like the worst economy in like 15 years. But are what's your status right now with employment?
So I'm actually studying for the GMAT full time right now, and sort of looking at applications. So I've just sort of taken a break.
Okay. Could you go back to your job, or did you leave fully?
I left fully.
Okay. How could you get another job quickly?
Okay. Should I be looking for another job at the moment?
Yes.
Oh,
Quitting your job to study for the GMAT and to write your applications is actually probably not a
okay.
great idea.
Got it.
Just because at least if and sorry, which business schools are you targeting? I don't think we oh, sorry, US MBA programs on the East Coast. There it says it. Um, do you have any specific programs in mind that you're looking at?
Not nothing specifically. I was looking for anything that has a good like impact sort of program or opportunities on that side.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay. So, first things first. The thing is that for the US programs at least, because so many like they take at least roughly two-thirds of their class each year from the US, people in the US don't quit their jobs to study for tests or to apply to business school. And
Okay.
so I know sometimes you can think, well, like, but if I'm working and I'm studying, like, my GMAT score is not going to be as high. But the thing is, like, everyone else in the competitive pool, or everyone else who's like at least from the US, is working and studying full time.
Okay.
So even if you do really well on the GMAT, if they know that you quit your job to study, it won't seem as if you get a really high score, it'll be like, well, but yeah, but she wasn't working.
Got it.
So it may not it may not have the impact that you would like it to. And business schools really care a lot, much more about professional impact and professional contribution than they do about the test score. So
Okay.
someone can have like a lower type of GMAT score, but if they have done like a ton of great stuff with their career, like a lot of business schools will overlook that.
Got it.
So I don't know if you can go back to your previous employer and like ask if you could rejoin them, or at least something along those lines to not have this kind of gap in the resume, because my concern is that
Okay.
if you're unemployed at the time of applying, then asks it sort of raises a bunch of questions of like, well, why did she leave her job, and then you have to explain it, and then they're like, oh, but I don't know that we're really into that. So it just becomes a big complicated mess to have to explain. So first things first, I would try to either get either your previous role or some other similar role. And then what I would love to see in your profile is if there's a way for you to try to get a little bit more impact, and you might have to kind of, do it informally on some level, like maybe going to like some partner at some sort of a firm and be like, hey, like I know that I'm doing a lot of like the fundraising support and some of like the HR support and stuff like that. But I would really love, can I just like sit in on some of the investment committee meetings? Or can I just look over the pipeline that you guys are I would just love to see what you guys are thinking and how you're making those decisions. Because I think that your profile would be a lot stronger if you could point to some way that you have helped shape the firm, or some way that you have helped drive a critical decision
Okay.
at the firm.
Hmm.
And so because I think that would help a lot. I think one of the challenges with saying impact investing is that impact investing is like a really hot field right now, right? Like when I was in business school almost 20 years ago, it was real estate. Everyone wanted to do real estate, and then everyone wanted to do tech startups, and now everyone wants to do impact investing. And so the problem with when something becomes like a trendy career vision is that it gets a lot harder to get in with that sort of a story. Oh, not harder, but in other words, like the scrutiny that's given to someone's profile suddenly goes up in terms of like, well, can she get that job at an impact investing company? Like, let's see, she wants to transition from being more of like a support, someone who's like a supportive teammate, to being someone who's driving the decisions, but don't really, I don't see a huge history of that yet. And the VC firm that you're working at has been more consumer focused and not social. So it's like you have
Yeah.
like the investment side and the social enterprise side, but I don't know that they're together. So a couple of things. First of all, when you're applying, if you had, the reason I was asking, I was trying to get at a little bit earlier in terms of like your trajectory of your responsibilities and what you've been doing in some of your previous jobs, is that if at this last role, for whatever reason, you maybe you had more responsibilities, or perhaps the better term is more relevant responsibilities, things that are more relevant to a job in impact investing in your earlier jobs, you may want to devote more space literally on the resume, but also like figuratively when you're talking in your essays about things that you've done. You may want to focus more on those earlier experiences if they were more directly relevant to a job in impact investing,
Okay.
even if they were from a year or two ago, only
Okay.
because then it helps make that narrative a tight one.
Okay.
And you may want to consider altering, instead of saying impact, and I know this is, you're like, it's Maria, it's the same thing, but instead of saying, just because the term impact investing is so trendy right now, maybe it could be like you want to go back to the VC firm, the VC world, and but working for a fund that focuses on socially responsible companies like ed tech, or the sorts of things that you've had experience in. And the
Got it.
reason, you're like, but that's the same thing, but it's a slight, I know it's like it's such a minor thing, but like when the people who are applying for the impact investing jobs, there are not that many of them, unfortunately, and they
Mhm.
do tend to go to people who have worked, say, for investment banks before.
Okay.
Um, and so it tends to go to people who have banking experience, and or if they've been in the investing side, they have had more actual, like, I invested in these 5 ed tech companies, and I invested in these 2 solar energy companies, or whatever it is in ESG or corporate responsibility that they're into. And so in order for it to not seem like as much of a jump, and that you're trying to get like one of the 2 jobs that's out there, it could just be pretty difficult. Um, to get one of those jobs. Okay, so maybe just sort of alter that a little bit. You also need to start thinking, I would think, about your who your recommender is going to be, your
Mm-hmm.
recommender or recommenders. So most programs ask for 2 letters of recommendation, uh, but some only ask for one. So like Ross, I think off the top of my head, it changes a little bit every year. But so, you'll, another benefit of either, I don't know if you can, maybe you can't formally go back. You're like, oh, for whatever reason, I can't go back to the place I just was. Maybe you could like do some. Are you on good terms with any of the people that you worked with? Because you will probably need a letter of recommendation from one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could say like, "Oh, I'm happy to consult for you guys part time," or something like that. So then that way they have strong things to say about you. Um, and then one thing I would say, and this sort of applies to everyone, your resume is very aesthetically pleasing. Unfortunately, it is, I mean, it's beautiful, right? It's got these nice little lines and these things. The problem is that it's not tremendously easy to read.
Okay.
So, and it's also 2 pages. So for most business schools, they either say it has to be 1 page only, or
Okay.
they strongly suggest that it's 1 page, which really means they want it to be 1 page, right? They're
Got
like,
it.
you know. So I think you are going to want to put it all on 1 page, and I think that is going to mean sacrificing, for example, there's like a section like skills at the top. You don't really often need a skills section,
Okay.
because you'll convey those skills through the bullet points or through the other parts of the resume.
Yeah.
So things like that are not important. And on GMAT Club YouTube channel, I've done a resume webinar a couple of different times, so you can check that out.
Okay.
And I think that'll have a lot of good stuff for you to look at. Yeah, because one of the problems is that since you've got these beautiful columns, your work experience goes down one column on 1 page, and then it keeps going on the next page. And so it's
Yeah.
hard for me to get, or for a reader to get a sense, like, at a glance, what is the overall story of your career? because it's like I
Got
have
it.
to flip. I'm like flipping back and forth between the pages.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, those are my overall comments. So now that I've given those comments, what questions do you have as a follow up?
I just had one question in terms of how I can sort of strengthen my profile from, I mean, because it's a little heavy on the impact side as compared to sort of the business and the finance side. What can I be doing to sort of strengthen it?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think, I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to brainstorm. Mm, I mean, if there are there any of these social impact companies that you have incubated in one of your previous roles that you might still be in touch with that maybe you could consult to on some level, right? That perhaps you could go to them and say like, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. I helped you
Hmm.
get funding a couple years ago or whatever. Like, what can I help with? Can I be your temporary marketing manager? Can I be your temporary finance manager?"
Okay.
Something along those lines. um that could be a way for you to strengthen it. Maybe the story for business school is less about I want to go into investing. If the investment part of your profile is not the strongest part, then maybe you just sort of say like, well, I went to VC to learn how investors think, so that one day when I work for an ed tech company or when I
Hmm.
create a social enterprise, I will now know how to pitch it to investors. But the
Okay.
investing isn't my destination that I want to reach. It was cool, it was a great learning experience, but my heart is really in working for the social enterprise. Because
Okay.
if that's where your stronger experience in, instead of looking and saying like, gee, like not a ton of like cool background, she's done some great cool stuff, but not a lot of investment experience, then it becomes the narrative is more like, oh, she's done a lot of cool stuff, and she look at all this hands-on work she's done with portfolio companies, with social enterprise companies. Like, in other words, play to your strengths. If your profile, if the story that you can tell is a stronger one with working, say, directly with social enterprises, then I would focus more on that in terms of the story that you tell, in
Okay.
terms of the examples that you use in your application, and in terms of where you double down over the next 6 to 12 months professionally. So maybe that's what you could do. Maybe you could try to get a job one of these types of companies, either one you know already
Got it.
or a different one. So then that way it's sort of, because then I think if, especially if you go to work at a smaller company directly, you might be able to have more of that impact. Just because it's social enterprises, it's I run a social enterprise. It's every, there are no resources. And so the bad news is there are no
Got it.
resources, but the good news is that there's plenty of opportunities to jump in and try to make a difference. And so I think that's what I would advise you to do. So then that way you're showing that you've got that ability to push through change.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, great. I think I've got about 2 minutes left of the time I've allocated. Any other follow up? Any other questions?
Anything on maybe what sort of schools I should be targeting with like an impact focus?
Yeah. So I think the schools that have good social enterprise programs. Um, I mean, the good news is a lot of them have good social enterprise programs. So right off the top of my head, I think of Ross, I think of Yale. Um, Kellogg is very good in social enterprise as well. Some of the more investment heavy schools, those might be tougher just because they're going to attract the people who are already working in heavy duty impact investing and heavy duty VC investing.
Okay.
Um, and so that might be, and also like, yeah, they might be more focused on the hardcore numbers and analysis a part of things. So I think some of those other schools, a lot of schools have great social enterprise types of programs. The other thing to think about as well is, I don't know if getting a scholarship is an important piece of this for you,
Mm-hmm.
but if it is, let's say you do really well in the GMAT, scholarship money is, I know that everyone enters this process thinking about the top programs. And then the thing is that the top programs are less likely often to give a lot of financial aid, like a ton of scholarship money.
Okay.
um, and so just if that is something that is important for you, maybe cast a wider net to look at programs that might not be as quote unquote famous, but can still get you where you need to go professionally, and maybe more likely to give out scholarships. So off the top of my head, I would think of like an Emory, for example, could be a great school that can absolutely a lot of these jobs are just as open for people in a lot of different programs. A lot of the variability in these average, when you look at like the average incomes and stuff, it is because it's more like it's a bunch of people who go to like hedge funds, and so they pull that average up.
Got
But the fact is, a lot of these, especially from the very large employers, it's the opportunities are very similar from school to school. So I would sort of cast a wide net,
okay.
and yeah, it's usually better to apply to more schools than fewer.
Okay.
All right,
Awesome. Thank
excellent.
you.
Cool. All right. Well, if nothing else, you can. And by the way, I told you could reach out to me later, so you could do that. So I think I have to move on now to our next candidate, EG. All
Hi.
right. Hi, EG. Would you
Hello.
like to hi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Definitely, yeah. Thanks, Maria. I'm EG. I'm a mechanical engineer by graduation. I am a problem solver by profession, and I'm a salesman by passion. I graduated back in 2016 with a degree in mechanical engineering with a GPA of 9 plus on a scale of 10. And the impact to the within the university was one where I headed all-terrain vehicle design team under a team of 25 engineers where we went racing with a car. And I was also the head of the public relations team in the college's annual Tech Fest, increasing the footfall by close to 20%. Post my mechanical engineering stint, uh, I joined a Fortune 500 European multinational company, which is a market leader in India, Europe, and worldwide in the sector of construction products and construction chemicals. I joined them as a management trainee after an internship, and I stayed with them for 4 years, during when I grew from the position of management trainee to a design consultant for a period of about 10 months, and as a key account manager, primarily into strategic selling, but also into I would categorize it as B2B sales and strategic selling for a period of almost 3 years. And during this time, the impact towards the organization was close to $2 million sales per annum, about 90 percentage of market share, increasing it from 80% when I joined, and consistently hitting the revenue and the profitability targets as a salesman. The impact towards the society was I being in the building material sector, my clients were primarily the tycoons, the top 5 to 10% of the market players in the real estate segment in India. And I helped them all achieve uh, more sustainable designs in their buildings and increase the energy efficiency of their buildings by close to 20%. Personally, I told you about my growth. And after this came a 6 month gap in my resume, wherein I joined B School in India, ranked fourth. It is a 2 year full time MBA program with a specialization in sustainability. I joined them. It was in during the peak pandemic in the month of August 2020. But after joining, I realized that the clear goals that I have in my mind to progress from sales to marketing and strategy don't really align with what the program had to offer, as I could specialize only in sustainability. So this was a career gap for about 6 months. I dropped out from the program, not just because of this reason. There were a couple of other reasons also which triggered my decision. A couple of COVID-related exigencies in my family, and also the family startup that I am working in currently, which was founded by my brother and my sister-in-law. So I quit about 13 months ago. I am with my current company now. It's more than a year. I joined as a manager, taking care of the marketing and sales, hoping to leverage the connections that I built in my previous stint in the city of Bangalore. And it's an 18-month-old baby as on today, and I'm happy to say that we have grown 4 times this month compared to the same month in the year of 2021. So that's the impact that I've brought about, growing a startup, family-owned startup, although from 0 to 1. And right now I'm looking to do my higher education so that I can go back into corporate and pursue my goals of leading an organization.
All right, great. Is this your family's first startup, the one that you're working up now, or have they had other companies like in a portfolio?
Not really. It is a first startup. It is an idea conceived by my sister-in-law, supported by my brother. They needed someone to take care of the marketing and sales because uh, they needed someone who can actually bring in connections. The initial few months of any startup would need some amount of certainties with respect to revenues and profitabilities, which was absent when I joined. And I'm happy to say that I've brought it about now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, oh, and then previously, because you were at that other company, it looks like for about 4 years in increasing levels of responsibility within the sales organization, were you ever managing other salespeople?
No,
It's
I
okay
did
if you
not have
weren't. I'm
any.
just curious.
That's okay. I never managed direct reportees, but during stints of 6 to 8 weeks, because it was a Fortune 500 MNC, they had a very structured way of onboarding management trainees like me, or sales interns, or sales trainees. And during stints ranging anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks across different months of the year, they used to tag along with me and learn the tricks of the trade. And I don't know if this will count, but I'm still in touch with my bosses over there today, and they keep telling me about the successes that the people who underwent training with me are achieving today, and they are able to see some kind of the customer centric style that I was able to bring to the market. So I'm not sure how this will count, and or if this will count, but yeah.
All right, excellent. Okay, so I have a couple more questions. The family business right now, it sounds like it's been growing a lot. It started relatively recently and it's been growing well. Is it to a point where either soon or in the conceivable next couple of years, it would make enough money to like be able to essentially pay for you to go to business school? Or are we talking, I don't want you to divulge an actual revenue number. You don't have to do that. But I mean, is it, because growth, if you go from $1 to $5 of revenue, you've got a 500% increase, right? But it's still not may not be a lot. So is it enough where you think you could tell a story that it would become big enough? Or because I'm wondering if entrepreneurship should be part of the career story and part of that application story, which is why I'm asking.
No, I'll answer the question, but are you trying to understand if I want to join my own the family business
It's
back again?
it sounds like you don't, but uh it may be a better story for the purposes of applying if you
I see.
have like a family business to go back to. But of
I
course
see.
that doesn't mean that has to be the story. I'm just trying to explore what some of the different.
Sure, sure. So yeah, frankly, no. But and to answer your first question, if in a year or in a couple of years, or in the near future, will they be able to uh, in a position to sponsor my education? Yes, honestly, yes. The profits that we're making and we're expected to make, it can support my education if it means bringing me back into the fold. But yeah, I mean, it's a decision that I have to take after sitting with my peers here. But I don't think they intend to do it, and nor do I intend to do it. So,
Okay,
however,
great.
if it really is going to make a better story, then I'll the next question that came to my mind was, how am I going to uh, explain in my essays or in my interviews as to the skills that I'm supposedly going to gain during the education, and implement it back in my company. I need to. I haven't given a thought about it, but I think I should do it if that is the story that we are going to build.
Yeah, I'm not saying it should be the story or shouldn't be the story, but it could be an interesting way to go. Um, I think either way, regardless of what the story is, regardless of what happens with business school, if at your current company at the family business, because it sounds like you are a manager of marketing and sales, but when I look at these bullet points on the resume, they still seem or at least the second one is it immediately goes to sales, right? You're doing strategic
Yeah,
partnerships, so that's
yeah,
still very much sales.
yeah,
And then there are three bullets, and the last bullet point is like, oh, I'm also doing some email marketing and digital campaigns. So one thing that I would urge you to do just in general for your own career is
sure,
try to do at least a little bit more on the marketing side. So then that way, should you apply to a marketing job at a Fortune 500 company or whatever, let's say you go to business school and then you apply to that marketing job, you'll then have more substance on your resume to get that marketing job. And it will
sure,
also help you when you're applying to business school, because I think sometimes one of the challenges that people from sales roles have is that it can be difficult sometimes to tell if a salesperson is very, very good at executing orders or if they are like truly innovating and truly leading. So like I've worked with salespeople who are both, right? I've worked with some salespeople that you're like, okay, here's the product, here's your list. You just need to call the list and get the orders and boom, 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 boom. But then I've also worked with other salespeople who are like, hey, wait a minute. Like, what if we offered a different type of product? What if, I talked to a customer today and they said that they would really like to see this kind of a feature. Should we do that feature? So, one of the challenges when an admissions officer is looking at someone whose resume says sales is that it's hard sometimes to tell like which one of these two salespeople am I looking at. So as when you were describing your background, you mentioned something about strategic selling. So that to me sounds like it's a lot more like working with a client, maybe persuading the client. Maybe the client asks for a certain type of magical cement, and you're like, we don't make that cement, but why don't you try this other thing? Or the client is like, I want to save a lot of money. I think you mentioned that you had gotten some of them to do sustainability things. That could be a great leadership story right there, right? We just want to save money. We want the cheapest cement possible. And you're like, oh, but if you get this other one, it's more expensive, but you're saving the environment. Like that,
Right.
any examples that you can have of that will help show you being more the proactive, innovative type, as opposed to just the like, yeah, they give me a list of people to call each day and I call them and I call them and I call them, right? So
Right.
just as a heads up in terms of like which stories to emphasize in your application, those sorts of stories. And then obviously the impact that you've been making in your family business. The reason I was asking a little bit about like the financial viability of the family business is that, if you've had a lot of impact at the family business in the course of only a year, that might actually be the more impressive story. And then if that's the more impressive story, then maybe the story is I want to go to business school to go back to my family business. And you don't actually have to do what you say you're going to do. People who have every intention of doing what they think they're going to do get to business school and then they completely change their minds, right? You might end up doing pharmaceuticals, right? Like you people get to business school and sometimes they do all kinds of different things. So it would have to be a matter of like almost maybe you would have to almost excuse me, in your head come up with like two different versions of what this Y MBA career vision type of thing looks like and see
Sure.
which one sort of flows more naturally and which one lets you highlight more strengths of yours. Just
Sure.
because, as I was saying before to ST, the smaller the organization is, the more opportunity you have to really impact things and to say, like, I was working with 4 different people who were under me, and I was doing email marketing and social media marketing and all this stuff. So that might actually be that experience, even though it's only been a year, might actually be a slightly stronger experience, or you might want to balance it 50-50. But I think you see what I'm saying? Like it might actually
Yeah.
be like really cool stuff to focus on. And so if that's the case, then maybe you could say, well, I want to go back to the family business. I'm not saying that's what it should be. I'm just saying like that could be an alternative to look for. But either way,
Um,
getting more marketing experience now, or at least highlighting it more. So right now, the resume right now, a couple of things. On your resume, you were at this one job for 4 years, but you don't list like the different titles that you had. I don't think it's
no.
you sort of have these buckets of like, here's sort of like a bucket of some things that I did, and here's another bucket like I did consulting, and here's some bullet points related to that. And I did this, and here's some bullet points, and it makes it really hard for me to get a sense of like the progression of your
Okay.
experiences. So also like, being sure to explain things like I started at this level, but then I went up to this level, and then I kept growing. That would be a good thing for anyone to put in their resume, because it just helps me. It helps a reader get a quick sense of like, okay, whoo, this person is, he's well respected or she's well respected in their company. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so in terms of your target MBA programs, Cambridge, Oxford, HEC, NUS, IIMs. So what was it about Cambridge, Oxford, and HEC, or HEC, as the French like to say, specifically? What is it about those programs that you are interested in?
Well, if I have to speak about my post MBA goals with respect to the function or the sector that I want to get into, all of them offer, in my based on my research, equal opportunities. But what made them stand out was that in the long term, I would want to be preferably in an English speaking country, and that's why Cambridge and Oxford stood out, and or NUS for that matter, and obviously Cambridge and Oxford because of the college system that they have, the network that they can bring in, and of course the prestige that goes with it.
All right, excellent. So and also Cambridge, Oxford, and they're also 1-year programs, which is also
Yeah,
um, so keeping in mind that a 1-year program, so that only makes it all the more important for you to start to get some marketing experience, marketing versus sales experience now, because in a 1-year program, you're not going to get that summer internship, right? They might have, some of them might have like a little quick mini internship, but they're not going to have
yeah,
like the full summer that allows for more of that career pivot. So just sort of keeping that in mind. I would take the French program off of the list only
okay.
because, well, but your last it so your last the employer that you worked for several years has a French sounding name. So was it a French company?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So is that where the interest in HSA came from? From working for a French.
Hopefully, so this was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Uh, yes, I agree with you when you said even in the previous conversation, Desti, that when you work in a smaller company, you really have more impact towards the growth of the organization and the others surrounding it. But well, don't admission committees and colleges in particular like brands on the resume? And if that is really the case, I hope to spin the favor. Hope to spin the story of me working in a French company to my favor.
Yes. The thing with the HSA that I would really want you to reach out to other students from India who are there
Sure.
and ask them about like what are the career opportunities afterwards, because HSA is very elite within Europe for sure. I don't know though if you need to like speak French, for example, or if they tend to focus on placing people in, say, France or Germany, um, because they are so they are. I mean, they have a very global student body. I'm not saying like if you go there, you have to try to get a job in France, but I am a little. I would just, if I were you, I would just look at like reach out to actual students or people who recently graduated and be like, okay, when it came time to graduation, were the marketing jobs at these large pan, or were they available for us even if we don't speak the local languages? um, because if the answer is like, well, actually no, you kind of have to speak French and they kind of want that to give you the job, if that's the case, then maybe HSA may not be the best use of your energy, and maybe other 1-year programs in the UK, for example, could be a good place to look. There are also 1-year programs in the US, although they're not as often, and they're not as often. There aren't as many of them, um, and they're kind of weird to get into. Like Cornell has one, but you have to already have had a master's, and Kellogg has one, but you have to like have already taken some business classes to qualify. But that could be an interesting, just some interesting ones to look at, because it sounds like the 1 year you're more interested in that shorter format. Another format that you could look at, by the way, is Columbia Business School has a program called the JTerm. Have you heard of JTerm? Okay,
Yeah,
so for people who
but it
might not be
doesn't.
familiar, it's
Again, I think it doesn't provide the opportunity to do an internship, which helps me to pivot.
right, exactly. So it starts in January instead of starting in September and then ending 2 years later, roughly 2 years later, with a summer in the middle. You start several months later in January, and then you just go straight through. Um, the benefits to J term is that you're right, it is not as easy to like career pivot because of the lack of the summer internship. But then the other 1-year programs that you're looking at may not have the summer internship either. Um,
Right.
J term is it's a little bit, the reason I was asking a little bit about the company, your family company finances, is that J term can be honestly a little bit easier to get into, but they love people who are either sponsored by their companies or who have family businesses that can cover the cost of of getting in, of going there. So
Under-
JTerm does not tend to give out a lot of scholarships, for example. but they love like either people who work for like banks or consulting firms, or the firm is like, whatever, we're paying for them, or people who go work for family businesses where they're like, hey, I need to get back to my family business as quickly as possible. Therefore, I don't need the summer internship. And by the way, my family business is either paying for this directly, or maybe they're not, but they will hire me when I'm out. And ergo, once I'm out, I will be able to pay back these loans no problem because of the revenue that we make and because of the money that we're making. Um,
Sure.
so that's one of the easier ways, quote unquote, to get into like one of the top 5 type programs. But it does come with that downside, right? It would be expensive, and it would and it wouldn't have the summer internship. Another thing you might want to think about is in terms of like marketing. If you could really, because I know that Oxford in particular is really interested in people using business to solve like big world problems. So
Yeah.
that sustainability angle, there might be something there to like if you were trying to convince people to do sustainable construction work, and if your family business is doing it creates a physical product, if I understand correctly. Does your family business create physical products?
It does, but uh, I'll have to weave a story. With the first word of the story has to be written today if I have to talk about the sustainability in my family business.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to like, even if it, like the packaging, you make it like a more sustainable version of the packaging or something. And then you could say like, look, I decided to help out my family. I had to take some time off because of COVID and whatever. And then I decided to help out my brother and his wife and their business, which was a great experience. But my heart is really back in big corporate sustainability stuff. I was able to learn marketing. I was also able to nudge them in the direction of sustainability. Sustainability is where I want to go. And so I want to work in marketing one day for a environmental focused company, or even something like where you used to work, which is a construction firm that is offering environmental products.
Right.
That could be a way to try to tie it all together while still needing an MBA.
Sure. Understood.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. This is my 63rd month of work experience. And if I'm applying to the cycle in 2023, by the time I join, I would have about 75 to 80 months of work experience when I join. How good or bad is it? Because I see most of the programs having work experiences ranging between 4.5 months to 4.5 years to 6 years. So I'll be kind of progressing away from the mean, which would
Hmm.
mean that the next application cycle is kind of make or break. So one more year might delay it even further, and I'll have to think of executive MBAs and not full time MBAs.
Yeah, that's right. You are. I wouldn't say that you're at the what I call the expiration date. I don't think you're there. But I do
Okay,
think that this year will be like it'll be like like, yeah, I don't think it's like the last chance you ever get, but I do agree with you that it is kind of your not your last chance, but kind of the last in
understand.
terms of like I think if it doesn't work out this year and you stay at the family business, you could then make the argument that like, oh well, I've learned so much in these 2 years at the family business, and so it was like, look at how much stronger of a candidate I am now because now I've done so much more and I've expanded my responsibility. So you could try to, if it doesn't work out this year, that could be like the argument the following year.
Sure.
Um, and by the way, for anyone watching this, like it is somewhat common for people to have to reapply to business school over the course of a couple of different tries or a couple of different years. So it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because there's some uncertainty behind it, but also there are second and sometimes even third chances, right? I've worked with people who've gotten into business school in their third try after unsuccessfully applying twice before. So, but yeah, I think so for you. Again, I think it's about casting a wider net, um,
Okay.
and reaching out to schools that have I think Cambridge, Oxford, maybe some of the other 1 year programs in the UK. Um,
Sure.
and I'm not as familiar with those just because I live in the States, but I think like Warwick might have a pretty good 1 year MBA. Um, Canada could also be a cool place to look at if you can handle the weather.
Yeah.
In fact, Rotman. So I visited Rotman several years ago, and I was really they have like this innovation lab that is like a really cool like design thinking program that any student can go into, can partake in, even regardless of what their career interests are. And it's Canada also has pretty friendly immigration policy. So if living in a different English speaking country is of interest to you, I would definitely also look at Canada. And a lot of the Rotman is a 2-year program, but a lot of the other ones in Canada are also 1-year programs. So maybe look there as well.
I will. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Okay, so I think now we have to move on to our last candidate here, JN. All right, JN, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, Maria. Thank you for doing this. I've graduated from Westminster International University in Tashkent in 2020 with econ and finance background. So since then, I've been working in one of the largest manufacturing companies in Central Asia as a senior strategy and investment analyst role. So far, I've been involved in making up companies' strategies, selling, marketing, operations, and improving its operation processes, business models, setting up targets for 5, 10 year, 1 year, and also involving in financial side, from making main investment memos and financial plans, etc.
Okay, so it's right off the bat, one thing that is, I think, would be useful for anyone watching is that what your company does because they're a big deal in your country, but I have not heard of this company before because I'm not from Uzbekistan.
Sure.
So I think, like, for example, on the resume explaining, and I've got all this in like either again, this is a YouTube resume thing that I mentioned before that you can find if you Google me on the GMAT Club stuff. But also within Applicant Lab, like, it's important for the reader to get thank you. See, they put the little link there. Thanks, GMAT Club. To give the reader a sense of like, such and such company is Uzbekistan's third largest conglomerate that does construction materials and automotive and manufacture. Like, you need to give on the resume a little description for the reader to sort of orient themselves and be like, and it also doesn't help that your employer happens to be like, well, this might be a word in your language, but to me it just looks like a series of like letters, like an acronym, right? Like SOS or LOL, like an acronym of like, it's like some letters that don't mean anything to me, and that's the name of your company. So like, it's even harder for me to get a sense of like what you do. And so I'm like, I have to read several lines in before the word like manufacturing is mentioned. So right off the bat, like, to help the reader get a sense of like, where do you work, you want to say like blah 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 company, and then right underneath, like, we are Uzbekistan's fourth largest manufacturing company that specializes in metals and plastics, or whatever it is that you do, just so that way, like, someone will at least know like, where does he even work. And so so it's interesting because and again, this is something I talk about a little bit in my resume webinar, is that I get, like, sometimes when we start thinking about our resumes, we think that we have to put like all the things that we've done, right? So I'm looking at your bullets, and you have like your first bullet. I'm not going to read it out loud, but it's pretty impressive, right? It sounds like you helped launch something cool for your company. To summarize it, is that an accurate?
Yes, actually, we are on the process of launching. So we've started around 6-7 months ago. So we are still launching on process. It's not on yet.
Okay, but you are sort of coordinating this, what seems to be a pretty big deal, like this thing that is going to
Yep.
launch. And so that's like really cool. And then the next bullet point is like, I prepared pitch decks and some studies and so like, it's almost like there's like this, the first bullet point is like, wow, that's really neat. And then like, pitch decks are fine. There's nothing wrong with pitch decks, but like, it's so much less sexy than helping launch a new division of your company. So one thing I talk about is this thing, I like to call it the real estate rule of your resume. So the more space you devote to something, the more, perhaps even subconsciously, the attention of the reader is going to go to that. So if you devote equal amounts of space on the resume, where it's like 2 lines are, I'm helping coordinate the launch of this awesome new thing, and then the next 2 lines are, I did some studies and some due diligence reports and some pitch decks, like spend more space describing the cooler experience, and then maybe pitch decks is the last thing, or it's only one line instead of two lines, right? So try to think about what are my more impressive, the resume is more like your greatest hits instead of like, here's everything I do. It's like what's the greatest hits album for your favorite singer, right? So what are my greatest hits? My greatest hits are I'm helping launch this thing. I'm coordinating amongst, like I would love to know more information here of like how many people are involved that you're coordinating. Have you had to? What are some unexpected hurdles that you've had to overcome? What are some of the different hats you've had to wear, right? Is it just operations that you're working on, or are you doing operations and financing? So anyway, and this applies to everyone, if you have like certain things in your resume or in your past that are like more impressive, then spend more time, more space on the resume talking about that, even if it means that some of the stuff doesn't even get on there, even if it means that you completely remove I don't know which one it would be, right? But the things that are sort of more basic. So like if you're a financial and investment analyst and one of your things is, well, I analyze finances, like that's sort of obvious that would be part of your job, but it's not obvious that you would help with that title. It's not obvious that you would be helping grow your company in a whole new place. So focus on like the sort of things that'll be like, whoa, that's really cool. Even if it means that you remove or delete a lot of the other stuff. One other thing that I saw here, and this applies to everyone. When you give a certain number, if you say like, oh, $2 million, or, I helped whatever, $500,000, give me a percentage of what that means. So if you say like, oh, I'm going to help expand the business in a new place and it's going to give X million dollars, that sounds like a big number, but if you worked at Exxon, that would be like the change that they have in their sofa, right? Like people at Exxon are like, oh, look, I found $5 million in my sofa that fell out of my pocket. But people at like a nonprofit, $5 million is like more money than they're ever going to see in their, the whole life of the nonprofit organization. So help give the reader a sense of that context, right? Percentage, like this represented 7% of the company's revenues. This will increase companies' revenue, it's 80% of our budget for the year. Something like that. Percentages can help a lot. And also you did put things in US dollars, but I think I think some of your numbers in your resume may have been in Indian rupees. So just be sure to translate it into the currency of the country that you're applying to. Anyway, so JN, I'm like, you give me a few different names now. I'm like, JN, that's what you're going by right now. Okay. So you just graduated though about 2 years ago. So are you looking to apply to business school like this upcoming season?
This fall, yep.
Okay. My only concern, so I worry that you're just like how I think EG is quickly, maybe in a year or two, reaching his expiration date. I'm not saying that it would not work out for you this year, because it sounds like you have been doing some really cool stuff, but I think you would have better results if so it's not like, oh, well, she said that I wasn't going to get it. I'm not saying that you're not going to get it. I'm just saying I think you would have better results if you waited another year or two, if you continued on the trajectory that you're on, and then you applied with, say, 4 years of experience. And then if we sort of fast forward a year, then instead of it being, I'm currently coordinating some new thing that we're going to do, it was, I coordinated something that we did, we launched it, and look at how cool it was. And as a result of that, I was given even more responsibility. So then if you were to do that, then you would be in an even stronger position. And you'd also have, the average amount of years of work experience that a lot of the programs, especially the ones that you mentioned below, is about 4 to 5 years. So it's absolutely possible to get, and I think you're a strong, like, you're clearly a high potential candidate, right? The things that you've been doing so far, but in terms of like being as competitive as possible, there's a little thing in the back of my head that's like, oh man, if this is where you are right now at like the 1.5 or 2 year mark of your career, if you keep going on this pace, like at the 4 year mark, I think you would have a stronger shot. So I think the question for you is like, is it about you really want to go to business school and you're like, I have to go to business school, and I have to start in 2023, in which case, like, apply to a number of different programs. But then if it's like, if the schools that you listed there, like Yale, Darden, Duke, if those are the ones you definitely want to apply to, you can apply this year. By the way, like, because reapplication is such a common thing in business school, there's nothing wrong with trying. And I think you may have a good shot. It's not, how do I say this? I'm not saying that you don't have a good shot now. I'm saying I think you would have an even better shot. No, whatever level you're at right now, I think it would be better 2 years from now. So if you want to get into the more elite program you want to get into, maybe try some of these this year. I think it could work out. But keep in mind that maybe in a couple years you might be even stronger. So I guess this is my way of saying, like, if it doesn't work out, like, don't worry.
Yeah, sure.
Like,
Thank
if
you.
it doesn't work out for you this year, I think you're fine. So yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, and keep just trying to make that, moving away from the more like like some of the things, more of the impact stuff, where it's either like, I went to this one part of our company and I helped transform how they were manufacturing things. Like, that sort of stuff is good. And I can't help but think that you would continue along that route towards the more and more responsibility, assuming you do well at what you're doing now. So I don't I don't know, what questions do you have for me after?
Yeah, I have some questions around about the GMAT scores. So, at what should be my aim? Like 730, 740, or the higher the better?
The higher the better. Obviously, that's never, no one ever was like, oh man, my GMAT score was too high. But I also wouldn't, your university was the language of study in your university English?
Yeah, it was English, yes.
Okay. But you're not, like, your country is not an English speaking country.
Yes.
So I think for folks who are, I think that there tends to be a little teeny bit more leeway on the verbal score for folks who are from countries where English is not commonly used. So
That's true.
I think for you, like, focusing more on, like, just getting that strong quantitative score. So aim for 730, 740, but if it's a little below that, I wouldn't. And if it's dragged down just a little bit because of the verbal, I like to think that there would be some sort of understanding about that, where it's like, well, I don't know, if I had to take a standardized test in Uzbek, I don't think I would do okay on the math part, but I'd probably do pretty poorly on the reading comprehension part. So I wouldn't stress too much. And the good news is, again, since you are so young and you're getting started on this process so early, like, you're looking to take the GMAT in May. If for whatever reason you don't get the score you want, all the more, you can take your time. You can take another year. Like, there's no rush for you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, excellent. 2 minutes to go. So, poor long-suffering Abhijit from GMAT Club is used to me always going over, never making the time. It's like a 1-hour session, and then he's like, Maria, you need to wrap it up. You need to wrap it up. 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left, and we're done. So with that having been said, what I will do now is I will thank my 3 very, very nice and very brave and very accomplished young people for joining me here today. I hope that I was able to give stuff that was useful for you. And for anyone else watching, I hope I was able to give some generalizable advice that is useful for you. If Abhijit from GMAT Club wants to hang out and we can take questions, the 3 of you can go. You don't have to, like, hang out and continue to stare at the camera. You can get on with your lives. But if you want me to stay, Abhijit, and answer some questions that came across in the chat box, I'm happy to do so. Or I'm also happy to let you get on with your evening, so you're not trapped here with Maria's constant talking. But anyway, thank you, JN, ST, and EG, and thanks for joining. And so I will. Let me see if I can. Oh, can I see the comments? Ooh, okay. So, there's a lot of comments here. So let me see. What I tend to do when I'm answering the questions in the comments is that if somebody has like a super specific question, like my blood type is AB negative and I have green eyes and I'm left-handed, what are my chances? I tend to not try to answer those because it's like it's only useful for you. First of all, the first thing I see is David Kurameng, Applicant Lab is the best active user. Thank you, David. So nice. Okay, so the first question that has been chosen is, I am an 11 years experienced software engineer. I want to pursue an MBA. What kind of MBA would be most suitable, EMBA or MBA? So at the 11-year mark, I don't know if you were listening earlier when I talked about, and I look, I'm old, so when I say things like expiration date, like no one should be like, I'm middle aged, so I'm not trying to be offensive when I say expiration date because my expiration date is far, far greater than yours. The thing that's tricky about having 11 years of experience is that sometimes like you're kind of like in this no man's land between you're sort of past the expiration date usually for the traditional full-time MBA, but sometimes you're not like quite at the level yet for the executive MBA. So a couple of thoughts. If you have 11 years of experience, if those 11 years have been involved in very impressive leadershipy things. Like if you are, I don't know, leading a team of software engineers at a unicorn and you've spent those 11 years at a place like, I don't know, Flipkart, and you were engineer number 3, and now you've been there for 11 years and you helped take them, from 0 to a zillion, that could still be a really cool story to tell. And so I'm not saying like, oh, 11, like there is no standard cutoff. It just gets harder because the older you are, the more accomplished you have to be in some senses, because it's for a number of reasons. Number one, because so if you're 11 years now, you'll enroll with 12 years, and if it's a 2-year program, you'll graduate with 14 years of experience. That'll put you in your mid 30s. So if you think about it, a lot of the post MBA jobs are targeting people who are more like 28 years old and not 35 years old. And the reason that matters is because many of those jobs might have certain expectations for the number of hours you have to work and the demands on your time that younger people without families and with their young bodies and young brains are able to handle no problem. But sometimes it can be harder for the more experienced people to get certain jobs out of MBA programs just because of pattern matching. And some of these firms might say like, well, we've noticed that when we start people, like for example, let's say you wanted to work at like a place like McKinsey, and you started there as at age 36 post MBA, you'd be an associate. You'd probably be reporting to someone who's 28 years old, right? And so, your boss would probably be several years younger than you, as an example. So, it can just be hard to leverage that, to gauge. Sorry, leverage is not the word I was thinking of. I need more coffee. I have this is my lucky cat mug. Anyway, it can just be, you're sort of in a weird no man's land. So here's what I would tell you. I would say apply to full-time programs this year. Why not? Give it a try. The worst thing they can say is no. And then, but if you really want to start studying the MBA on some level, then also apply to executive MBA programs. Maybe not for the same school though. And also like start looking around if you really want. Earlier, I was mentioning the Canadian programs and programs in Europe do tend to be more open to older candidates. If you have, I don't know if you have like some sort of a master's degree, but if you do, then that qualifies you to apply for the 1-year program at Cornell that I mentioned earlier. So there are definitely options for older people. It just gets a little bit tougher. And also you yourself, if you look at your situation, you might realize, hey, if I do a part-time MBA, I don't have to quit my job. If you're in a position where you're doing well professionally and you want to keep going up the ladder, a part-time MBA or an executive MBA could be great for that. So without knowing a whole lot else about you, I would say I think it will be tough to get into a 2-year MBA program, but of course, also like if you've done some really super cool stuff, then those things are easily overlooked. but I would say apply to maybe both types just to hedge your bets. Okay, so Sirant Shrivastava is asking, will CFP help my profile for MBA? CFP is Certified Financial Planner, I'm guessing. Anyway, let me just Google that. I don't want to start talking, and then what if I say? And then what if I see if it does stand for certified financial planning. Good. Okay. I got to tell you, I don't off the top of my head, I don't think it will. Getting some sort of a thing like the CFA or those sorts of things where like you study on the side and you get some sort of certification. Look, is it a bad thing? It's not a bad thing, right? Think about what it proves to the admissions committee. It proves that you are able to study on your own and that you are a self-motivated person and that you are able to grasp businessy related content relatively easily. However, I don't think that the sort of things that are covered in the it's for financial. Yeah. I don't know that it would be super relevant to what an MBA program teaches, because an MBA is more about managing a company as opposed to managing an individual's finances. So I don't think it would help a lot. I think what they're going to focus a lot more on is what you've been able to accomplish at work, and also something like your GMAT score, because they might not have a sense off the top of their head of like, how hard is it to get a CFP? And by the way, if it's difficult, like for those of you who have done like a CFA, for example, where it's like, it's actually really, really hard. And, then you might want to put either in the resume or somewhere in the application form, like, hey, I got a CFP certification. I got it on my first try, only 15%, in the parentheses, like only 15% of people who try to get the CFP on the first try get it, something like that. But I don't think it'll move the needle. It's a nice to have, but it's not going to make up for like a lackluster professional background, for example. What are some good MBA programs to apply to if one is looking for a tech-related MBA or someone who is looking to be in product management? So Jivan BR, the good news is that 15 years ago, this answer would not have been as positive, and now the answer is a ton. A lot of MBA programs over the last several years have woken up to how important tech is, and especially so in terms of a tech-related MBA, there are some MBAs in the US that are one-year programs that are called literally the Tech MBA. So Cornell has a one-year Tech MBA. NYU has a one-year Tech MBA. And those could be, you want to look into those because they're only 1 year long, and they could be a way to try to sort of jump into one of those product manager jobs a little bit faster. But the good news is a lot of the US programs, especially if you're talking about something like product management at a place like Amazon or Microsoft or one of those big tech employers, they have very similar recruiting processes across the top 10, top 15, definitely the top 10-ish schools, give or take. So, I have a former client. It's Shovik. He's a GMAT Club celebrity. So maybe you all know who he is. I don't know. Maybe he's not as active anymore. But so he went to Ross, and now he's working at Amazon. And this is all like public on his LinkedIn, so I'm not divulging anything confidential. But like if you go to a place like Amazon after business school, you could go to Harvard and you could have the same job as someone who went to Stern. So the good news is that for big tech, the fanciness of the school doesn't matter as much for getting the job the way it does for some industries like private equity or venture capital. So this is my long-winded way of saying, Jivan, that there are a lot of good programs if you want to do product management, especially at a big company. And the best news is that if a scholarship is important to you, then you might be able to get a great scholarship at one of the schools that is not quite as fancy. They might be more willing to give you a scholarship, and yet your career prospects coming out would be just as good as if you had gone to a Harvard or a Wharton or whatever, if you end up at one of these big tech firms. And with that, I do have to get going. So thank you so much, everyone. Yes, please do check out applicantlab.com. I've got a free trial that gives you a little bit of a sense of some of the stuff I've got available. I do huge deep dives into each of the top schools' essay questions. So if you're staring at some of these essay questions and you're not really sure what to do, please look at my advice. I will not charge you $5,000 for it. With your GMAT Club coupon discount code, it's $315, which is less than what I would otherwise be charging for 1 hour of my time. So please do check it out. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining me here today. And I hope everyone's got a great rest of their day. Lucky Cat wishes you a lucky day. Bye.